Howdy folks, Tex Grebner here with Tex Grebner Outdoors. New videos every week, so if you don't want to miss out on any of your Tex Grebner Outdoors Saturday morning cartoon awesomeness, you better make sure that you click subscribe, check that notification box, and check my channel every week for new adventures. I love reading your comments, and I really do appreciate all of you that watch. I need to catch you up on what's been going down out in the deer woods this week, because it's Illinois Archery season 2017. With chores, I had got into the woods later than what I wanted to, but yet it had been a very warm October day, almost too warm for mid-October. So it was pleasant conditions, but too nice for deer hunting, as ironic as that sounds. So I wasn't terribly worried about the fact that I had gotten in late, because with as warm as it was, I didn't expect any movement until it got very close to dusk in the magic hour, when anything is possible. Sitting behind a bush, directly on the trail that those three does had taken last week, watching, waiting, listening, getting excited against my own better judgment. Every time a tall grass stalk would sway, or something would rustle the corn, even though I knew it was the wind, my heart would be in my throat, and I would be ready for action. The sun began to dip down little by little, and it began to cool, and the wind began to calm. Now the wind wasn't necessarily in the right direction for this spot. But with that being said, I never, ever actually get to hunt deer under ideal conditions, because I live in reality, and that's just the way my life works. Sitting behind this bush, hoping and praying, wondering and waiting, and so dreadfully excited I almost trembled as the sun continued to dip down and the shadows began to lengthen, because the magic hour was upon me, where anything is possible, and there is no knowing what will happen until you have seen it. But when you are hunting wild and free, majestic creatures, there is no predicting them. They get to change their minds, they get to do what they want, and there is no way to make them do something other than what they already want to do. Such is the appeal and such is the challenge. I had been so very excited, but as the shooting light faded even more rapidly, I realized that this would be yet another empty hunt, and the slow descent into madness continues. I never sleep well before a morning hunt. I will lay awake in the darkness of my bedroom, staring at the ceiling and daydreaming in my mind, plotting and scheming, envisioning what might happen in the darkness of the woods. I had left for the woods well before daylight, and the morning dew had wet the leaves as I made my way into the timber around the cornfield. I had had no activity whatsoever when I pulled my trail camera cards last night, and I was a little bit confused. But with the deer nowhere to be found and not knowing where the deer might be, I guess that means the deer could be anywhere. My favorite time is the time just before dawn, when anything is possible. And I was sitting on an alcove next to a trail around the cornfield underneath a white oak tree. The sunrise had been absolutely breathtaking as the combines droned in the distance. The sun grew higher and higher, and I could see where the deer had matted down the grass searching for the acorns. Everything was so absolutely perfect, with the morning chill and the wind in my face and a light rain pattering. Knowing that at any time a deer could happen down this trail around the cornfield, presenting me with an absolutely perfect broadside shot. turn the cameras on, draw, fire. Every sound would send my heart into my throat. The wind held its position in my face. And still I sat, as still as I possibly could. There was a wood pile behind me, so I knew that the only approach would come from the front of me, wondering if the bucks would start rubbing on the saplings along the cornfield. Everything was so absolutely perfect. The only thing that it needed was for a deer actually to show up, never knowing what might happen. But that's just the way that hunting goes. Even if everything is perfect, the majestic whitetail lives by its own rules. I bring you the reality of bow hunting. I am very confused, and I was wondering, where are all the deer, and where might they be traveling? You see, I thought I had them figured out, to the point where I would finally be able to realize my dream of validating myself as a professional outdoorsman. Finally, wondering, watching, listening to the birds twitter in the branches above my head, doing a terrible job of sitting still, as always, because I'm so very excited in the woods. The wind was in my face, and there was a wet chill in the air. The leaves were turning on the trees, and the magic hour came closer and closer. I was sat behind the bush again on my camp stool, waiting alongside the trail for such a simple ambush. All it needed was for a deer to step into my view with my cameras rolling. Hoping for anything to take my trail, I watched the corners of my vision as the shadows began to lengthen. But you see, you cannot take Mother Nature by force. All game under fair chase conditions must be a gift from God. The air was cool as the night came closer and closer, and everything was just right. The primal excitement began to take hold in me as the wind shook the leaves and the corn stalks rattled, and soft rain began to patter all around me. I peered into the shadows for any sign of deer. The rain continued to patter even harder, and the geese began to fly south. The hunt is a visceral mystery, and anything is possible in the magic hour. Hope fought with desperation in my mind and in my heart as I sat on my camp stool behind the bush, determined to wait until the very last of light, experiencing the visceral mystery of the hunt, my mind a phantasmagoria of bucks taking my trail, wondering, watching, listening. And yet I admit, it may seem incredibly foolish to some of you, my style of hunting. Sometimes plans are just dumb enough to work, and you never really know what may happen in the woods. In the high-stakes game of whack-a-mole that is bow hunting, I had been at the wrong place at the wrong time, and there was deer activity in front of one of my trail cameras earlier in the morning, while I had been forced to fulfill my real-life obligations, and the slow descent into madness continues as the wee folk of the woods continue to torment me, but I'm just so damn entertaining. Now, I know when I go out deer hunting that I'm probably not going to see anything at all. Not a damn thing. I know that because I've been conditioned to think that way, because that's the way life works. You don't just show up and the deer are like a shotgun blast across the timber all around you. That ain't how it works. I don't care what you think you know. Anybody that's really hunted whitetail knows that there is a high likelihood that you're not going to see a damn thing. And yet, even knowing that this was probably going to be an empty hunt, hoping that I was wrong, I made my way around the cornfield to the backside of the property to try and hunt the timber, hoping against hope that a buck would come by to rub on these saplings in front of my spot. Because you never really know, even though most of the time I end up being right and I don't see a damn thing. But this hunt had started off a bit rocky, because when I was making my way around the cornfield, because it had been raining almost all day, my approach was totally silent other than the swish swish of my pants against the wet grass and corn stalks, and I had practically walked up on a doe before she busted me. You see, the corn funnels me around the property, and the terrain funnels me around the property, where deer can basically go wherever they want, because they are wild and free, majestic creatures. Finally, everything was going to line up. Everything was so utterly perfect. I had the perfect wind, I had the perfect ambush, I had the perfect weather because it had turned cold overnight, and the greatest time of all is that darkness just before dawn. Because in that darkness, as I've said, that's where dreams can live. And I never sleep very well before a morning hunt, because I'm constantly laying awake in bed staring at my ceiling, envisioning deer walking down my trail and playing it out in my head and mentally preparing. Now, I was set up alongside of a trail around the cornfield where I had had deer activity in the mornings. The wind was blowing directly across me from the field. It was cold and crisp and moist, and everything was so utterly, absolutely perfect as the morning moved on further into the day. Every squirrel, every bird would heighten my excitement, waiting for the action that was to come. Now, I will be honest with you, when you've had as many empty hunts as I have, it's like waking up on Christmas morning to this massive box, a box that can contain all your dreams. And you open the box, and it's completely empty. Empty. Completely empty. And the person that gives it to you says, "This empty box represents all the intangible things that go into the joy of the hunt." And frankly, you look right at them and you say, "Thank you for an empty box." Because at least with an empty box, I can crawl inside of it and pretend like it is something else. Because while this morning was completely perfect, the setup was perfect. Everything was perfect. It required one key element, and that was for a deer of its own free will to decide to walk past me. Because I was set up 10 yards for a perfect shot, and nothing showed up, and I was forced to leave the woods for my real-life obligations. Back in the woods after I finished chores, and it was still a cold day. I was set up on a different spot, wondering, waiting, hoping, praying. The wind had changed during the day, and so I had chosen a different spot. Again, I was 10 yards off of a cornfield where they would be funneled down directly in front of me. In front of my little hideaway where I am shielded behind 2 bushes with a shooting lane in between for my cameras and my arrow, there was a crazy amount of deer tracks. This is the same spot that has the grass matted down next to it from the deer foraging for the acorns that dropped out of the white oak tree that I'm leaning up against. Everything was so absolutely perfect. It was so calm. The air was chilly, and the wind was in my face. Ready for action, wondering, hoping. The hunt is a visceral mystery. And sitting on my camp stool, I have no idea what is about to happen. But I can see it in my head. I can envision what I want to happen. And all I can do is wait for things to line up, wait for things to be absolutely right. The weather got even cooler as the sun started to sink and the magic hour approached rapidly. I knew that there was deer traffic in front of this spot. I had seen the tracks. The corn would funnel them right past me, and because I was tucked away behind the thick brush with only a shooting lane, all it would take would be for a deer to take the trail around the cornfield, offer me a 10-yard broadside shot, and it would be a done deal. But with free-range, fair chase whitetail hunting, there are no guarantees. I don't have an easy answer, and I don't really have a good answer. The fact is, hunting is hunting, and there's nothing that I can do about the fact that the deer just aren't showing up where I want them to, when I want them to be there. I don't have manicured deer property. I don't have quality managed deer, and the best of my scouting seems to have come to absolutely nothing, because free-range whitetail get to do whatever they want, and nothing I seem to do seems to matter. So I admit I'm closing this week pretty frustrated. But every time we go out into the woods, especially when you're me, it's always a brand new adventure. So I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this week. I have another episode for you next week. As always, God bless all my sportsmen of America. Join the NRA to protect our rights. Please check out my friends over at SOETacticalgear.com. Thank you very much to those of you involved in law enforcement and those of you served in the military. Thanks for watching Tex Grebner Outdoors. Life ain't like the pornos. Hunting ain't like the TV shows.